Hyvernoir was an old town in northern France, hidden behind ancient birch forests, cloaked year-round in fog and snow. On a bleak December afternoon, Chief Inspector Etienne Rousseau received an urgent phone call from a woman named Claire Marchand, a name he hadn't heard in 15 years, not since the infamous Valmont family case back in 2009. "He wants to kill me," Claire whispered over the line, her voice trembling as if it might shatter. When Etienne and his team arrived at the de Veyrac estate, where the Valmont family now resided, they had no idea they were about to step into a nightmare. Within the dim light and bone-chilling air of the mansion, they found Alaric Valmont, head of the family, and his 2 sons dead, in a manner beyond comprehension. The 3 corpses were suspended mid-air, with no visible wires, no supports, as though some invisible force held them in place. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide open, veins burst like dried blood within their eyeballs, and their mouths sealed shut, as if by something older than death itself. The eldest son, Matthew Valmont, Claire's husband, was discovered in the second-floor study. His body lay face down, blood spilling across the floor from deep, deliberate cuts across his flesh, as though someone had tried to bleed him dry. Beneath him was a small, blood-soaked note, bearing only one name, Claire Marchand. Claire was found curled up in the corner of the living room, unharmed, untouched by a single drop of blood. Her eyes were vacant, her lips quivering, and she kept repeating, "I didn't kill anyone. I didn't do anything." There were no signs of forced entry. No broken windows. The estate's iron gate remained locked from the inside. Whoever the killers were, if they existed, had never left this place. Yet there was no clear evidence pointing to Claire as the murderer, except for that bloodstained note and the past she herself refused to acknowledge. The Valmont family had once been among the most aristocratic lineages in the Provence region. Alaric, the father, once dealt in gemstones and occult artifacts across Eastern Europe during the 1980s. Rumors claimed he had offended a secret society in Hungary, forcing him to flee and return to France in secrecy. Earlier this year, the Valmonts moved back into their ancestral mansion in Hyvernoir, the de Veyrac house, a cold stone estate built in the 17th century, abandoned for decades. Locals referred to it as the Silent House, for it never showed light from within, nor emitted any sound of life. Leon Hart, a young yet seasoned officer, couldn't help but recall the first time he saw Claire, standing before the rusted gates of St. Martel Orphanage 15 years ago. She had stood alone in the rain, clutching an old book, her eyes empty, as if she'd grown used to solitude. Even then, Leon Hart sensed something off in those eyes, as if she belonged to a world not quite ours. He ordered her to be brought to headquarters for interrogation. Meanwhile, the remaining officers stayed behind to continue the forensic investigation of the mansion. At the police station, Claire sat still like a ghost. When questioned, she insisted that her father was just a retired teacher, and that she had married Matthew Valmont after graduating from art school in Paris. She claimed to have never known anything about the gemstone business or the Valmont family's dealings abroad. But Leon Hart presented archived files from the St. Martel orphanage. The documents showed that Claire had received financial support for 12 years from someone named Alaric Valmont, beginning when she was 6 years old. Not only that, but she had later been sponsored to study at the University of Culture in Prague, then returned to work for a time as an assistant at a company run by Alaric's second son, Lucien Valmont. When confronted with these records, Claire was stunned. She stared at the signatures, the seals, the photographs, then trembled and shook her head. I never received any sponsorship. I don't know them. I've never heard of anyone named Alaric or Lucien." Leon Hart looked at her for a long moment. He reminded her of their first meeting at the gates of the orphanage. But Claire only bowed her head, lips pressed tightly together, and whispered, "I've been there since I was 3 years old. But I don't remember. I don't remember anyone." Her eyes were bright, deep, and hollow, as if they held nothing but the truth, or a void more terrifying than any lie. As a pale morning covered the sky above the city of Andermark, Inspector Leonhardt sat by his office window, his gaze heavy as he stared out at the mist-covered oak forest beyond. In his hand was a faded medical report, one corner torn slightly as if it had been hidden, fought over, and turned over hundreds of times. The report had been discovered by his colleague, Dietrich Faulkner, tucked into a narrow slit inside the leather bag of the victim, Philemon Trecht, who was known as a psychiatrist but, in reality, had only one patient, Claire Marchand. The report, written in hurried, scrawled handwriting, documented the course of psychological treatment for Eloan over the past 4 years. When handing over the document, Dietrich had emphasized several unusual aspects. Most of the notes revolved around hypnosis therapy. Trecht had not simply tried to help Claire forget painful memories, he seemed, by his own interpretation, to be replacing them entirely, crafting a new, staged life for her. "This isn't therapy anymore," Dietrich said to Leonhardt as they sat in the file room, yellow cold light reflecting off the dusty shelves. "This is a kind of artificial memory reconstruction. A deliberate manipulation." According to the report, hypnosis sessions were conducted almost daily, and over time, the level of hypnosis grew deeper. Philemon noted that Claire's mental state became severely unstable, with signs of psychosis, disorientation, and paranoia. Notably, about 3 weeks before the massacre, Trecht had enhanced his method by putting Claire into an extended deep sleep, as if to seal something away inside her mind. Since then, all previous suspicions that Claire was the killer began to fade. There was no physical evidence tying her to the crime. And if her memories truly had been altered, then all her denials, of the Valmont family, of her husband, of the name Philemon Trecht, could indeed be genuine, from her perspective. However, Leonhardt was not so easily convinced. He remembered the empty yet crystalline look in Claire's eyes when she said she had never seen him before, even though he clearly recalled the first time he saw her, 15 years ago, at the rusted gates of the St. Martel orphanage. After Claire was released to return home, Leonhardt, guided by the seasoned instinct of an investigator who had spent years chasing the darkness hidden within European aristocracy, immediately requested Dietrich to contact Europol to investigate the Valmont family's immigration history, financial records, and connections during their years in France and southern Belgium. When things settled down, Dietrich turned to Leonhardt and asked about his connection to Claire, why he remembered her so vividly. Leonhardt told him. 15 years ago, winter arrived early in the outskirts of Saarhelm. The sky was cloaked in thick fog, and snow fell sparsely on the old rooftops of the St. Martel orphanage, a place that took in the abandoned, the forgotten, or the cursed. Leonhardt was new to the force at the time, dispatched to investigate a family incident in the village of Gravensthal, near the Tuffelwald forest, where a crumbling mansion stood, and where screams had once echoed, keeping villagers away after dark. The report stated that an 11-year-old girl named Claire Marchand had called the police, saying that her parents wanted to sell her. When the officers arrived at the scene, they found her parents dead. The father's body was riddled with stab wounds, his hand still tightly gripping a blood-stained knife. The mother lay sprawled near the window, her skull shattered. Claire was found crouched in the kitchen corner, where the dim light of an oil lamp cast a faint glow on her vacant, haunted eyes. Her sleeve was torn, revealing bruises and dried cuts on her arm. She spoke very softly, her voice as if drifting from some distant place in her mind. "Mother wanted to sell me. Father didn't agree, so they died." From her statements and the evidence at the scene, Leonhardt gradually pieced together the horrific picture. Claire's parents had long been separated, living under the same roof with seething hatred. Her mother, a cold, paranoid woman, believed her husband was having an affair and unleashed all her fury on her daughter. In a fit of madness, she tried to sell the girl to a passing merchant. The father, upon returning and discovering the situation, erupted in rage. They argued violently. An old neighbor, Mr. Karl von Klaus, heard the screams and barged in to intervene. The scuffle broke out in the dark, ending with 2 corpses and a girl who would remain silent forever. Claire was sent to St. Martel. Leon Hart was the one who took her there. On the way, she said nothing. But at the rusted black iron gate of the orphanage, just as he placed a hand on her shoulder to send her in, Claire suddenly turned and asked in a voice as cold as the winter wind, "If you could erase everything, would you do it?" Leon Hart did not answer. But her eyes, that gaze from long ago, had never left him. And now, as everything seems to circle back to that deadly manner, to the memories torn to shreds, Leon Hart can't help but wonder, did Claire ever truly forget? Or is there something inside her that never really vanished, only buried deeper than the permafrost within her mind? As the dark clouds rolled in over the gray horizon of Valheimshire, Inspector Julian Dorn still sat frozen in the worn leather chair of the manor office. The room, steeped in the scent of aged leather and the dampness of old books, grew heavier with the final lines he had just read from the Interpol email. The words, clinical and precise, seemed to echo up from some blood-soaked, sorrow-filled abyss. During the 3 days she was missing, she went through hell. Leon Hart read the line again and again, as if refusing to believe it truly existed. His eyes drifted to the last photo of Claire Marchand, the girl he had once placed all his hope in, quietly sent off to the Brackenholt orphanage 15 years ago, believing she would have a new beginning untainted by the tragedies etched into her body and soul. Back then, Leon Hart thought it was the right decision. He had visited her often over the years. Teachers said she was a gifted student, calm, always drawing pictures that made people stop and stare. He had believed in the light. But now, as the truth peels away the polished lies, Julian knows, if he had known everything back then, he would never have left her behind. The letter from Interpol laid bare a tangled and gloomy web of relationships. The Valmont family, led by Alaric Valmont, once a powerful figure in both academic and financial circles of Central Europe, had been the ones funding Claire throughout her years of study in France. She studied fine arts at the St. Maurice Academy, where she was not just a student, but also the family's private portraitist. Her paintings adorned the hallways of the Valmont estate, like ghosts watching the world through the eyes of the dead. Then, a year ago, after painting a portrait of Alaric Valmont in the third-floor gallery, the girl disappeared. 3 days, vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. When she returned, Claire was like a blood-soaked ghost, her body bruised, her clothes torn, sweat soaking through the fabric, and her eyes wild, like someone who had lived in a cellar where even the darkness had consciousness. After that event, her mental state deteriorated completely. The report stated, she began to show erratic, uncontrollable behavior, frequent delirium, and even violent tendencies. No one could calm her, except for Matthew Valmont, the eldest son of Alaric, now known as a part-time hypnotist, despite lacking any credible credentials. He began using hypnosis to manage her psyche, plunging her into deep, prolonged sleeps, sometimes lasting hours, sometimes days. Interpol also confirmed that during that time, the Valmont brothers, Philemon and Matthew, had started investigating the link between Claire's disappearance and a name, Julian, a name that seemed foreign, yet tied to a lost royal bloodline from Eastern Europe. The Valmont family filed a complaint and quickly withdrew back to their homeland, leaving no explanation behind. Leon Hart sat still, chilled to the spine, not because of what he had read, but because of what he had not. Pieces were still missing. When the region's most esteemed psychiatrist, Dr. Benedict Krause, arrived at the estate to begin dehypnosis therapy on Claire, Leonhardt stood quietly by the ancient window, gazing at the fog-covered garden. He pulled out a peppermint candy, a habit of his when he needed mental clarity. As the fading afternoon light slanted through the bare trees, a thought drifted through his mind. A manor this vast, why are there no surveillance cameras at all? He turned to Assistant Inspector Lucien Thorne, his loyal partner of many years, and asked softly. Lucien nodded, replying slowly, I found that strange too. Even if it belongs to aristocrats, in this day and age, there should be at least some basic security system. They immediately descended to the archives. After nearly an hour of digging through property documents and local police records, a cold truth emerged. The manor had once been equipped with a full surveillance system, covering the hallways, drawing rooms, and the back garden. But when the Valmont family moved back to Valheimshire 3 months ago, Alaric officially filed a request to have all equipment removed. The reason? I don't live to be stared at like a prisoner. Though the police objected, the family's influence and status rendered them powerless to act. As a result, all footage from the previous 3 months was wiped from the system. 3 months. That was the critical window. No one knew what had truly happened in the manor during that time. No one, except those who bore the name Valmont. Leonhardt clenched his fist as he returned to the hallway where Dr. Krause was working with Claire. He knew he was entering a labyrinth with no map, where the walls were made of memory, and the darkness resided not just in the corridors, but within the mind of the only person who could tell the truth. Claire Marchand. Leonhardt and his colleague, Dietrich Faulkner, had spent hours staring at the blurred monitor, fast-forwarding and rewinding hundreds of hours of footage from the Von Ellsberg residential zone, but found nothing conclusive. Until they paused on a seemingly harmless clip, a recording from a month ago, as described by the complex manager. Claire had walked the grounds for quite some time, then collapsed into the artificial lake. However, just before reaching the lake, there was a 10-minute blackout in one surveillance zone. Leonhardt's instincts told him the perpetrator could have been in that blind spot. Unfortunately, the camera had malfunctioned that exact day, leaving a 10-minute void in the footage. Claire was later rescued by a maintenance worker at the complex. The manager helped them locate the employee who was on duty that day, but no useful leads were gathered. What was odd was this: no one saw Claire enter the lake. No witnesses. And not a single working camera at the crucial moment. As dusk slowly consumed the view outside the manor's windows, Leonhardt felt the air grow thick, like something pressing against his chest. He lit a vintage cigarette, the kind once used by nobles to chase away the cold. Then his phone vibrated. A nurse's voice came through, Inspector Leonhardt, Miss Claire is awake.